This is Mongolian Mindset, and today we're going to be doing an analysis of Barack Obama, our sworn adversary, personality database, who we do not think highly of, has him as an ENTP. That's interesting. So that means they will have the functions NE in the first spot, TI in the second or parent spot, FE in the child or third spot, and SI in the fourth or inferior spot. And they have ENTP with 1,230 votes, ENFJ with 1,196 votes, and ENTJ with 41 votes. Okay, so we're gonna be doing a breakdown. Comment below if you want a celebrity type. We're gonna do a list and try to knock some of those off for you guys. Comment, like, subscribe if you like the content. So we can go ahead and start this.
I know who you are. Alrighty.
I had to make sure that we are socially distant.
You know, I appreciate that. How you been, man?
All right, so Barack is initiating off rip right here. So I'm going to put down a point for initiating. Go back, listen to it. Barack's ready to go.
Alrighty.
I had to make sure that we are
alrighty. Look
socially distant.
You know, I appreciate that. How you been, man?
I'm good. I'm Speedy.
Nice I know who you are, Speedy.
Okay, that's another.
Yeah, you know,
I know who you are, Speedy. I'm putting another point for initiating there. So 2 points for initiating.
Actually, you know, I've seen you out there.
I love to hear that. That's
You've
great.
Been doing some good work.
I try my best. I wish we didn't have to sit this far, but obviously.
I know, man. You know, I'd be giving you the dab.
It's all good. We'll do it telepathically. You know what I'm saying? Metaphorically.
That's exactly right.
I got to comment. The fit is
you
great outfit, my brother.
But you're clean, man.
I try my best. I threw on the Air Force Ones to be even more metaphoric.
So let's try to figure out pretty quickly. Is he direct or informative? Like we said, all these metrics pretty much come from Linda Barrens. So get her material, read it, and take your MBTI knowledge to the next level. Highly recommend you pick up Dario Nardi's work as well. His work is amazing. So yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I have a very fine sneaker collection, but I thought if I wore sneakers, it looked like I was trying too hard.
Fair,
you know what I mean?
Fair.
Okay, but if I wore sneakers, it would look like I'm trying too hard.
You don't.
Fair. You don't want to look like you're pandering or anything.
You don't want to look like the old guy in the club. You know what I mean?
You don't want to look like the old guy in the club. So he's caring about his TE, FI reputation. You don't want to look like the old guy in the club, so he cares about his reputation. Don't care how he's seen.
Yeah, the guy who's been there too long, and I know exactly what you mean, President. I know exactly what you mean. For Complex News, it's 360 with Speedy Mormon. I'm him, and today we have a very special guest, maybe the most special guest that we could possibly have. It's the 44th President of the United States, Mr. Barack Obama. How are you, man?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
We are so very honored. And I think back to years ago, maybe the first time you were ever on 60 Minutes.
Right.
Malia was asked, what does your dad make other than tuna fish? And she said, only chili, and that's it. And here we are in Ben's Chili Bowl in Washington, D.C. It makes sense. I'm wondering, have you learned to make anything else, or is that it for you?
You know what? I've got a few other things under my sleeve, but basically my repertoire is pretty small. And I think it's fair to say that since that time, I have done even less cooking. During the presidency, one thing you had was some chefs who could really throw down and fix some good food.
So what I'm really noticing right now is he seems to be coming off very direct. And direct means that he's specific, concise, and to the point. ENTPs, what the personality database has them as, have informative language. So they kind of beat around the bush. They give extra information. They're very passive. And when they talk, they're doing a kind of one down situation, as in direct language is one up, one down. So he seems to be, direct. He's choosing his role in the conversation. As an informed person doesn't really choose their role in the conversation. So, and if you want to see more informative language, you can go and compare someone like Andrew Tate. He's an ENTP, very informative language. And when you stack that on top of being abstract, it can really be tough to follow. Andrew Tate, you can follow Bruce Lee breakdown. We did a Bruce Lee And I think we did another ENTP on him. Not sure, but I know Andrew Tate and Kanye West. Look at those. Informative language.
So, fortunately, Ben's Chili Bowl has been an iconic spot here in DC, and I've had some half smokes here, and it is worth visiting for those who don't know about it.
Now, the memoir, obviously, A Promised Land, came out this week, and I think that it did a really good job, and you did a really good job of kind of humanizing yourself in a way that maybe a lot of people haven't seen before, including myself. I was kind of shocked that, you, the President of the United States, is a human being too. You know what I'm saying? You are very open in the book about your racial identity starting very early on. I'm biracial as well, same dynamic, white mom, black dad. And you say that you too have experienced your fair share of racial slights from a young age. I'm wondering, maybe is there one that stuck out that kind of you remember?
I mentioned in the book, and I've spoken about this before, I grew up in Hawaii, and in some ways it's hard to have a childhood that is less stressful. It's 80 degrees, you got beaches, there's a lot of different kinds of people, of different backgrounds, hues, and so in some ways I was protected and insulated from it. But even in Hawaii, you start, as you became a teenager, walking by a car and suddenly you'd hear the locks go down, or you get in an elevator and the purse would be clutched. Before I started playing basketball, I played tennis for a while, and I remember looking at the brackets that had been set up for a tournament and putting my finger on it, and the tennis coach at the time says, "Be careful, you might rub off on the paper." Right, and this is somebody who's instructing young people at the school that I was at. So, those kinds of things I think we all have had to deal with. But I'm careful to make the point that relative to kids who are growing up in Philly or Chicago or the Bronx, the kinds of pressures they have to experience at an earlier age are entirely different. And
he's very
part
direct.
of
So I'm
my
gonna go ahead
inspiration to.
I'm not having any trouble following him at all. He's very specific, concise, chooses his words very carefully, and to the point. I'm gonna go ahead and take that Barack is direct. So with that said, there's only 8 types that are direct. The other 8 are informative. ENTPs are one of the 8 that are informative. So right now, Barack can only be, because he's direct, he can only be INFJ, ENFJ, INTJ, ENTJ, ISTJ, ESTJ, ISTP, or ESTP. Okay? He cannot be one of the informative types. He's way too direct. Let's go back to this. So we're going to go ahead and take those off the board. So we're looking at ESTJ, ESTP, ENTJ, ENFJ, and that's the extroverted direct types. So the ones that initiate. We have the responding direct types, which is ISTJ, ISTP, INTJ, and INFJ. And the thing that can help us with either, if we can't find initiating versus responding, the extroverted ones are outcome focused. So they talk primarily about outcomes. And the introverted ones that are responding, like the ISTJs and INTJs, they are process oriented. So they look at the process of things, or they look at the progression, how things move about, and they'll talk about it in their language.
Get into politics was the inspiration of the civil rights movement, and knowing that I want to live in a country where kids aren't feeling that feeling.
And don't have to experience.
So he got into politics for an outcome. He got into politics for an outcome. See that? So I'm going to go ahead and put on a point for outcome. We already got him initiating twice. So we kind of know that he's headed toward being an extroverted direct type.
But I'm careful to make the point that relative to kids who are growing up in Philly or Chicago or
See, his language is very direct.
the Bronx,
to the point.
The kinds of pressures they have to experience at an earlier age are entirely different. And part of my inspiration to get into politics was the inspiration of the civil rights movement, and knowing that I want to live in a country where kids aren't feeling that feeling.
And don't have to experience.
Don't have to experience that. All of us as humans are going to have to go through hardships. Some of us are going to be luckier than others. But there shouldn't be a systemic situation where some kids...
Okay, so he's talking about the system there. Systemic. So I'm going to put on a point for systematic as well.
From an early age are suddenly feeling like somehow they might be outside looking in.
As the story goes, you end up in New York studying at Columbia University before you go to Chicago.
Right.
And there's a quick line that for many would just skate by, but you said that you bounced around in a couple of ill-fitting jobs in New York. Yeah. I'm wondering what those jobs were. Is the former president delivering pizzas on the weekend, or what were these jobs?
Listen, I had all kinds of jobs in New York, and I had all kinds of living arrangements in New York.
Yeah.
Because this is the early '80s, and New York had just come out of bankruptcy, and it was just starting to become what we now know of as New York. So Times Square is still rough. Mm-hmm. And there are big chunks of the city that are still torn up, but you're starting to see rents going up. And I was broke. I'm a student, and so I'm living in sublets that you find out that the person subletting it to you doesn't actually have the lease. You have to go down to housing court, and you've lost your deposit. There was one place where I was staying where the guy was actually doing construction in the room right next to where I was, so rubble's kind of spilling.
So he's going into like a lot of like SI here, memory. He's showing that his memory is like pretty damn good. So I'm gonna put a point down for SI. He's going in, and the reason why it's SI is because internal sensations tend to make you remember things a lot better. So people with SI, which is internal sensation, remember things a lot more vividly, and that's what he's talking about now. So that's the reason why I put a point down for that.
To you, doesn't actually have the
talking
lease.
About it very vividly.
You have to go down to housing court.
Like SE users tend to kind of forget things. They tend to remember things in totems.
And you've lost your deposit. There was one place where I was staying where the guy was actually doing construction in the room right next to where I was, so rubble's kind of spilling into.
See, like he's remembering the rubble spilling in
space, and I did construction work. I remember the New York firefighters. They had to do something with their medical records, and there was a big refiling job, and I was doing that. And then I worked for a magazine for a while. There was a business magazine, and then I left because I knew that what I wanted to do was really change the world and be part of a broader movement for social change. But even then, I was kind of bouncing around trying different things until this group of churches in Chicago called me up and said, "Look, we're setting up a community organization. Do you want to drive out here?" And I drove out there sight unseen, and that's really where I started growing up, learning, how I might be able to have an impact.
Yeah, they scooped you up for a calm $13K.
$13K, man.
If I'm not mistaken.
And car expenses.
You can't forget about the car expenses. You say a line in the book, now that we're speaking about jobs, you say, I believe you say, for all its power and pomp, the presidency is still just a job. And that's a lens that maybe a lot of people have never thought about it through. You maybe had the world's shortest commute ever. The West Colonnade, I think you said it was a 1-minute walk.
That's exactly
outside. Right. Why do you put it through that lens of it just being a job? And maybe what's that work-life balance like?
Well, you're part of the goal of the book, because you did a good job mentioning sort of the passage I go through.
Look at him telling what to do.
I talk about my youth, the fact that I was not somebody who was born into a family that was political. We certainly...
All right, so you just changed the topic there, so I'm putting another point for initiating there.
weren't wealthy. I wasn't somebody who was saying that I was going to be president and, being student council and all that stuff. And the reason is because I want young people who pick up the book to feel as if they're...
The reason why I did it is because I want people to, so he's looking for a specific outcome.
It was political. We certainly weren't wealthy. I wasn't somebody who was saying that I was going to be president and, being student council and all that stuff. And the reason is because I want young people who pick up the book to...
The reason why I told it is because I want a specific outcome.
On a journey with somebody who's just like them. I was not so special or so exceptional. I had some good breaks. I had some opportunities. I had some mentors and people who looked after me. But probably the most important thing that I did was just say to myself, you know what, if I'm going to do something with my life, let it be something that has a broader impact on other people. And that landed me in the White House. And so I want people to be able to relate to that because I think so many young people look at the presidency or politics or government.
So basically, he was shooting for an outcome and that landed him into the White House. Okay, so he's outcome focused. He's not looking at the how to, just spin the outcomes.
It's something so far removed, so distant that they can't relate. But the bottom line is, this is a group of people who are trying to make decisions about how we together are sharing resources and solving problems. And it's not that different from a lot of other
group of people sharing resources, how we can solve problems. Because we're looking at the outcome.
Other organizations. The stakes are higher, but it is something that is understandable if you choose to pay attention to it. And that is part of the job of citizenship, is us recognizing this is a government of, by, and for the people. It's not them ruling over us. Sure. It's how do we come together.
I guess he was talking about the system there. The governmental system there.
Part of the job of citizenship is us recognizing this is a government of, by, and for the people. It's not them ruling over us. Sure. It's how do we come together to rule ourselves.
Yeah, there was a time, especially early on in your political career, where it seemed like absolutely nothing was going your way. Right. You got blown out by Rush. Then your American Express card gets declined. You're trying to rent a car. You go to the DNC. You don't even have the right credential. Can't get on the floor of the convention. Right. You can't. You say in the book that you can't get into a party that night. Then you wind up crashing on a couch. It seems like absolutely nothing was going your way.
That was not a good moment.
Not a good moment, but you still became president. Yeah. You didn't let it deter you. It seems as though you bet on yourself almost. And I'm wondering why. Why is it so important to bet on yourself?
Yeah, I tell that story because here I am. I've lost an election for Congress, and I'm going to the Democratic National Convention, and nobody's paying attention to me. I can't even really get in on the floor. I'm feeling discouraged. I'm broke. Michelle is mad at me because, I've been spending a lot of time on politics, and that has put some strain on our family budget. We've already got at that point one young child and one on the way. And yet, 4 years later, I was the keynote speaker at
that same convention. Yeah.
Except this one was in Boston. And 6 years later, I'm running for president. And it gives you some sense of the fact that if there's anything that I've learned, not just in politics, but in life, is persistence in pursuit of a goal if you believe in that goal, if you care about it.
Care about a goal, go for a goal.
A lot of luck is still involved, and I, one of the things that I write about in A Promised Land is sometimes I would meet people who've been successful, Wall Street, CEOs and bankers, who somehow think, I'm successful, and it's because I'm smarter than everybody else. And I write about the fact that, anybody who doesn't attribute some of what's happened to them to good fortune, who
Chance,
thinks it's all
luck.
them,
Right.
to me, that means you don't really have much insight into how the world works.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people who work hard. There are a lot of people who...
So he's talking about the system there. Yeah, you don't know how the world works, the system of the world.
Who make a bet on themselves, who are talented, but things just don't work out. And that's part of the reason why my politics has always been about making sure everybody has a chance, and when people fall, society is there to give them a little bit of a hand up, because none of us are immune from bad fortune, just like good fortune, and we don't know ahead of time who that's going to be.
Yeah. I don't know if you're able to tell this by looking at me, but I haven't lived through many presidents.
Let
me go back to that, 'cause I think that was a system as well.
The reason
I
why
think that was
my
a system.
politics has always been about making sure everybody has a chance, and when people fall...
So my politics always created a politics or whatever, creating a system that can help people when they fall. So I'm gonna put a point for
Society is there to give them a little bit of a hand up, because none of us are immune from bad fortune, just like...
And because so that's systematic. Yeah. He's created a system to help people, regardless of good fortune or bad fortune, because that can fall on anybody. Just like you can have good fortune and become a big time CEO, or you can have bad fortune and be in jail.
Good fortune, and we don't know ahead of time.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Who that's going to be.
Yeah. I don't know if you're able to tell this by looking at me, but
he's trying to help people get outcomes. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate all the introverted types, the ISTJ, ISTP, INTJ, INFJ, because he's direct, he's outcome focused. And we did get 3 points of initiating to show that as well. But we got five points for outcome already. So we're looking at an ESTJ, ESTP, ENTJ, and ENFJ, and we got 4 points for systematic. So we're almost ready to eliminate ESTP and ENFJ. And the reason why we will eliminate ESTPs and ENFJs because they're both interests. ESTPs are in the moment interests. What do I get out of a situation? And ENFJs are people interests. They look at interest from a global for people. So we get another systematic point. We're going to go ahead and eliminate those. And ESTJs and ENTJs are both systematic.
Lived through many presidents.
And what systematic means is that they're trying to implement a structure, a procedure, a methodology, that type of thing. Or they're looking at a system, or they're talking about a system. They do that a lot.
Are you rubbing in the fact that you are young and I'm not?
No, not quite.
Come
not
on.
quite. But I haven't, realistically, I haven't lived through many presidents.
Right.
But many people consider you to be the cool president. A colleague and I were speaking, and he described President George W. Bush as the president that you want to have a beer with. I'm wondering, for someone maybe even younger than myself who didn't get a chance to live through your presidency, in a line or so, how would you frame your presidency? What type of president were you? Who were you?
I would say I'm the president who tried to bring everybody to the table, and to
I tried to bring
include
everybody to the table. So I'm going to put down a point for affiliative there. Trying to bring everyone to the table. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because David Keirsey, who's the original person who wrote the interaction styles, had it originally as cooperation versus utilitarian. Utilitarian would be under pragmatic, and cooperation would be under affiliative. And affiliative people just want to bring things together. They're interdependent. They care about the group, having defined roles, knowing their job. They really like that. Pragmatic people don't like that. They're somewhat rebellious, tend to break rules, and then ask for forgiveness, kind of shocked when people are thrown off by their actions and whatnot. So he wants to bring people together. So he wants cooperation.
everybody in the the benefits and the bounty of America. Look, as my press secretary, Robert Gibbs, said while we were running for president.
So he's referencing somebody else, so it's a TEFI. And you put the titles and everything on it, quoting somebody else.
None of my predecessors looked like me.
Yeah.
Right? So there was an obvious symbolism to being the first African American president. But beyond that, I was just as concerned with what's happening to poor rural white folks or Latinos who are in bad schools and not getting the kinds of health care that they need, or LGBTQ kids who were being bullied and left out. I'd like to think that my presidency was about saying everybody matters, not just some of us.
Yeah.
And then trying to operationalize that.
If you were born, not when you were, but
bringing everyone together, so we already got a point for Phil.
Say the year 2000, a Gen Z young Barack Obama.
Right.
What does that look like? Who is that Barack Obama, you think?
Who knows? I will say that when I look at my daughters, this generation, the generation that makes up a lot of your viewership and leadership, is more sophisticated, been exposed to more, better educated as a general rule. I think more open to people's differences. You think about just something like the image of black folks that was available to me when I was growing up, where you had Sidney Poitier and you had Diane Carroll on TV, maybe just a handful of folks. Now, through both television and the internet, you have black lawyers, black doctors, you had a black president and a black first lady, you had...
So, right there, he's referencing the past, but it's kind of in the question. So, normally I would chart that down as SI, because it's referencing the past and his past. But since it was kind of in the question, I'm not going to take that point.
Folks of every walk of life doing everything. Business leaders, entrepreneurs. Music is dominated by hip hop. So your generation, I think, and I guess if I was growing up now, I would feel that there are so many more options available to me in terms of how I want to be, who I want to emulate, what fields I want to go into, and that's a powerful thing. But I also would like to think that I would still recognize we've got a lot more work to do. And this summer, after the George Floyd killing, to see this generation take up the baton of John Lewis and Diane Nash and Bob Moses and some of the heroes in the civil rights movement and say, no.
He's dropping TE names there. TE name dropping like crazy. TE name dropping to get his point across. He's using TE, dropping names, highly qualified names to get his point across.
We're going to keep pressing for more justice and more equity, more fairness. That
justice, fairness,
was inspiring.
TFI like crazy. So 1 point for that.
To me, I'd like to think I
would
have been one of those young people who said, we got more work to do.
Do you think that you would have at all resembled your daughters?
They're smarter than I am and cooler. They've always been cooler. I had to develop it. They got that from their mama. When I look at Malia and Sasha and the degree of confidence combined with kindness and their instinct of treating everybody with respect and helping people, I'm really proud of them. And the fact that they were able to do that, going through this very strange experience of growing up in the White House, is a testament to Michelle and my mother-in-law and all the people who helped raise them. but also just an internal grace that they've had that I'm really proud of.
On a more serious note, and on maybe all fronts, it feels like this is the biggest divide that I've lived through, whether it's racial, whether it's financial, in almost every way that I can think of. And there's a quote from your book that sticks out, or you may have said it in an interview actually. You say, "I come out of this book very worried about the degree to which we do not have a common baseline of fact." And I want to share with you my experience of watching the presidential debates. This is I've covered elections, the last election, but when I was watching the presidential debates, I tried to come into it with an open mind. And so what I would do is I would flip back and forth between Fox News and CNN.
Right.
And after watching, when presented with the identical content, right, we all watch the same debate. If I put on Fox News, the lower third would say, Biden stumbles through debate. And then I put on CNN and it says, Trump stumbles through debate. It seems as though we have a real issue here if there is so much up for debate when we are presented with the same thing. Can you help diagnose this problem and maybe give us a solution? What is going on?
Listen, I think you just described the problem. And it has to do with the fact that the media is now splintered into 1,000 pieces. When I was very young.
So he's talking about when I was very young. So he's going SI on us there because he wouldn't ask that. So we're going to go ahead and put a point down that going to his past.
TV stations, 3 broadcast networks. And you had maybe a handful of papers that were national. And all of the journalists kind of followed the same playbook and reported on the same thing in the same way.
They followed the same playbook in the same systematic. Okay, he's talking about a system there. So we're going to go ahead and eliminate ESTP now and ENFJ. So we're down to ESTJ and ENTJ. And the difference between the ESTJ and ENTJ, ESTJs are affiliative. They're SINE users. And they are concrete. While ENTJs are SENI. They're pragmatic and they're systematic. Well, they're both systematic types. So we're primarily looking at, is he pragmatic? Is he abstract? ENTJs are abstract. Is he a SENI user or is he a SINE user? And we already got 2 points for SI. And we got a point for affiliative. So that's what we're looking at. We already have 4 points for TFI. Both ESTJs and ESTJs and ENTJs both have TFI and they're both systematic. So that doesn't really matter. They're both outcome. They're both direct. The only difference is that ESTJs are affiliative and ENTJs are pragmatic. I think you can get, if you look at the last video between Donald Trump, you can compare and contrast. This Barack is looking like an ESTJ while Trump is an ENTJ, and you can kind of see the differences.
So whether you were conservative, liberal, black, white, you basically got the same information, and then you'd have arguments, but you were kind of occupying the same headspace. And what has happened now, you've got not just 1,000 channels, on your cable or direct TV. Not only do you have all kinds of different news outlets, but the internet and social media. So what happens then is people start choosing what information they want that reinforces their biases, that tells them what they want to hear, not necessarily what they need to hear. And that has gotten worse over time. Now, obviously I'm a Democrat and I'm a progressive, so I think that generally speaking, if you look at mainstream news outlets or outlets on the left, they fact check and stick to journalistic standards more than a lot of these right-wing news sites do.
Awesome TFI biases there, buddy. Oh my God. Sorry, bro, I gotta put you down for that.
And you witness right now with the election over and all objective folks, even Republicans who aren't in elected office, acknowledge Joe Biden won. And yet if you were watching some of those conservative stations, they're acting like there's all kinds of fraud and illegality going on, when in fact there's no evidence of that. So at the end of the day, facts do matter. There is a pandemic going on right now. You can dismiss it and say it's not serious and that you're not going to wear a mask and that you're going to go ahead and go to a bar and party. Somebody will get sick. Reality will bite.
Okay,
if you're not
so
paying
it's talking
attention.
about the NE consequences, and SI and NE are on the same axis. So if you said SI statement, it's linked. It's also a NE statement because they're linked. So we got 3 points for that, and like we said, it's looking like he's an ESTJ.
Attention to it, and so we're going to have to find ways in which, particularly social media outlets now, are more careful about distributing misinformation.
So he's talking about
and that's
outcome.
a hard thing to do.
With social media, we need to figure out a way to get this outcome with social media. There we go.
Without engaging in the kind of censorship that is not part of our tradition.
Sure, you say
Which is
we're
not
going to have
part
to
of
find
our
ways,
tradition, affiliative, talking about tradition, affiliative.
Are some of those ways? I mean, you've got people who are literally denying the fact that we are in a pandemic that has killed 250,000 people. You've got people that are believing in QAnon stuff and just being reinforced by the people eat what they're fed, and so they're being reinforced. What? How do we even level with one another?
Let's take a simple example. It used to be that
You just initiated there.
the broadcast networks had to provide equal time to two sides of a debate. It used to be that there were
So
rules.
he's talking about the system there. Equal time in debate. That's what it used to be. And are you going SI again on me, buddy?
But what are some of those ways? I mean, you've got people who are literally denying the fact that we are in a pandemic that has killed 250,000 people. You've got people that are believing in QAnon stuff and just being reinforced by the people eat what they're fed, and so they're being reinforced. What? How do we even level with one another?
See, initiated.
Let's take a simple example. It used to be that the broadcast networks had to provide equal time
Used to be
to two sides of a debate.
in the past, so I'm gonna go SI in, and that's a systematic statement as well. Had a way to systematize it or put a structure in there, but it's not there anymore. So he's talking about the past. So we got 4 points for SINE. I'm ready to call this guy ESTJ. Yeah.
It used to be that there were rules governing what could or could not appear on the air based on
rules, systems, structures,
public interest.
procedures,
It used to be
methodologies,
that
policies.
journalists had standards of fact checking before they report on something. Social media,
Standards.
it
It's all
is possible because they're private organizations to be held accountable if they're disseminating what is patently false. So there are ways of doing this. What combination of new standards and government regulation creates at least some constraints on crazy stuff that is appearing?
We're talking about implementing a system that would slow down social media, but make it more accurate. So that's more systematic there.
And inflammatory stuff, that is a debate that we have to have. And I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet to it. But if we don't have it, then you're going to see the country break further and further apart.
So I have the what if statement, and any consequences again if we don't have it. So I got 5 points for SINE. the thing that you got to be really careful with people who have NE in the third spot, that's NE in the relief or optimistic spot, is they will say what if statements here and there, and that's just because of any child. But he's talking about the consequences here. If we don't have that, that's SINE. Barack Obama is an ESTJ, and that makes him, the first thing we noticed was he had direct language. He's pretty precise, specific, to the point, shoot from the hip. It's not very hard to understand what he's saying. He's not being passive. He's choosing his role in the conversation as an informative person. Don't choose their role in the conversation. It's vague, it's wordy, it's beating around the bush, it's passive. And if you want to compare and contrast, go look at somebody like Andrew Tate or Kanye West or Bruce Lee. Those are all ENTPs. He is not ENTP. He's also affiliative. Okay, so he cares about cooperation. He cares about being interdependent. He cares about roles being put out there and understood. As a pragmatic person, doesn't really like for them to be given a role, because it kind of takes away the freedom to make a decision. And pragmatic people tend to be somewhat rebellious, that type of thing. While I feel that people are ready to do the job. He is SINE, as you see. He refers to the past. He talks about any consequences as well. He's quite, he can remember things from the past quite vividly because they're intertwined with internal sensations, which is SI. He's systematic, obviously. We had like 9 points of systematic. He's talking about procedures, methodologies, things to control things, that type of thing. He's doing that a lot. And he's a TEFI user as well. So yeah, we got Barack as an ESTJ. And if you want to make sure you can tell the difference between the ESTJ and the ENTJ, Barack is an ESTJ and Trump is the ENTJ. Compare the two and you can see how an ENTJ would handle things and how an ESTJ would handle things. One thing that I do notice about ESTJs a lot is they tend to have this image of being perfect. Like they can do no wrong. As an ENTJ has an image of trying to be powerful and being effective and like pushing through things and being strong and powerful. So you'll notice that between the two. That's what I've noticed. There's no data or anything on that, but it's just what I've noticed. But we can go back and laugh at personality database again because they have Barack as an ENTP. They're probably seeing his NE child come out a lot, which is NE in the third spot. But they have him as ENTP, and that's NETIFESI. Barack is not a TI user. He does not use his own internal framework. He's using outside, so external sources. He's talking about achievements. He's talking about fairness and whatnot. So that's all TEFI and not TIFE. So yeah, personality database got another type yet wrong. Doesn't surprise us. But yeah, comment below if you agree or disagree. If you want to comment a celebrity for us to type, we will look into it. We will make a list and try to get to them. But this is Mongolian Mindset, and we're out.